Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates. Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 9th of December 2021 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today have been presented on your screen. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let us begin our today's discussion. Continuing with our weekly series of mains assignment question, the question for this particular week here is: the mechanization of Indian agriculture could prove to be a double-edged sword. In the context of the above statement, discuss as to how the agricultural mechanization can be improved. The answer to this particular question has to be written in 250 words. Now, before writing the answer to this particular question, I suggest you to go through the DNS dated 9th of August 2020, in which I have discussed all the aspects related to the mechanization of Indian agriculture. The first article for today's analysis appears on page number 1 of the text and context page. The article is titled as Global and the Indian Trends in Income Inequality. Recently, the France-based World Inequality Lab has published a report titled as World Inequality Report 2022. As the name suggests, this particular report highlights the extent of inequality both at the global level as well as at an all India level. The article that we are going to discuss here is multifaceted in nature and becomes important from the perspective of the essay paper, GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. Before understanding as to in what way questions can be asked with respect to this particular article, let us have a look at the previous year mains question papers. As you can see, the theme of inclusive growth is one of the most dominant theme for the UPSC mains examination. Repeatedly, UPSC has asked questions on inclusive growth in your essay paper, GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. Please take a pause, have a look at the previous year mains questions. So based upon the analysis of the previous year mains questions, one should think of what kind of questions can be expected in the upcoming mains examination, and accordingly you should think of how to prepare for such topics. So based upon such an analysis, various things that become important from this particular article are: first and foremost, the important highlights of this particular report. So the facts and figures which are provided in this particular report with respect to the income inequality in India can be used as fodder points in your essay paper, GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. Secondly, from the perspective of the prelims examination, one should be aware about various parameters which are used for measuring income inequality, such as the Kuznets curve, Gini coefficient, Lorenz curve. Then, from the perspective of the mains examination, various aspects of inclusive growth, such as what is the meaning of inclusive growth, how inclusive growth is different from welfare approach, what are the salient features of inclusive growth, and why India is finding it difficult to promote inclusive growth and development in India. The next and most important aspect is, given the stage of India's economic development, should India focus on promoting the GDP growth or should it focus on promoting the inclusive growth? Now, this theme becomes important because this was one of the important chapters which was covered in this year's economic survey. So, based upon the analysis of this particular article, you should be in a position to write an answer to this mains question for practice. The question here is: what do you mean by inclusive growth? Discuss various constraints and challenges in promoting inclusive growth in India. Apart from that, you should also be in a position to attempt these three prelims questions for practice. So let us start with the important highlights of the World Inequality Report 2022. So this particular report is published by the France-based World Inequality Lab. According to this particular report, India stands out not only as a poor country, but a country that has come to be characterized by high level of income inequality as well as wealth inequality. See, when you want to measure the national income of a particular country, we take into account the concept of GDP. But the problem here is that GDP does not tell us as to how the national income, how the wealth is distributed across a different section of population in a particular country. So this particular report looks at the income distribution, the wealth distribution in a particular country, Based upon that, this report highlights the extent of inequality in a particular country. See, as far as the income inequality is concerned, according to this particular report, the average income of an Indian is around rupees 2 lakhs, which means that on an average, a Indian earns rupees 2 lakhs on an annual basis. But the problem here is this is an average figure. The bottom 50% of the Indians, they earn just rupees 50,000 on an annual basis. Whereas the top 10%, that is the richest Indians, they earn almost 20 times more. That is, their annual income is around rupees 11 lakhs. To substantiate this further, please have a look at this particular graph. As you can see here, the bottom 50% of the Indians, they account for just 13% of our national income, whereas top 10% of the Indians, they account for 57% of the national income. So when we say the GDP, that is the national income, we just look at what is our GDP figure, but we don't look at how this national income is distributed. 57% of this national income is in the hands of the top 10% of the richest Indians, whereas just 13% happens to be with the bottom 50%. So this shows the extent of income inequality in India. See, as far as the trends in income inequality is concerned, from 1858 to 1947, during this time, that is during the British era, the extent of income inequality was higher. As you can see, the gap between haves and have-nots was quite higher. But from 1947, that is when India gained independence, to almost around 1980, during this time, the gap between haves and have-nots started reducing. So the extent of inequality in India started reducing between 1947 to 1980. This can be attributed to the planning which we had undertaken then. So as part of 5-year plans, we gave explicit focus on the reduction of poverty, reduction of income inequality, and so on. But unfortunately, after 1980s onwards, as you can see, the gap between haves and have-nots has continuously been widening. It has been increasing. This report highlights that this is because of the LPG reforms. So according to this particular report, the LPG reforms has benefited the richer class more than the poor people. Now take for instance, with respect to LPG reforms, the services sector has got more benefited in comparison to the agriculture sector. So on one hand, the services sector, it registers a double digit growth rate, while on the other hand, the agriculture sector fails to register the targeted growth rate of 4%. But if you see, between these two sectors, most of the people are actually employed in the agriculture sector, which accounts for 45% of India's workforce. So while on one hand, the people employed in the services sector, their income levels have been increasing. On the other hand, the people employed in agriculture, their income levels have got stagnated or they're not increasing on par with the people employed in the services sector. Similarly, if you look at the extent of wealth inequality in India, according to this particular report, the top 10% of Indians, they account for almost 65% of the wealth, whereas the bottom 50%, they own just 6% of the national wealth. So even though the average household wealth in India is almost around 9.83 lakhs, but the problem here is most of this particular wealth has come to be concentrated in the hands of the top 10 richest Indians, and less amount of wealth is in the hands of the bottom 50%. If you are able to remember these facts and figures from the perspective of your essay paper, GS paper 2, paper 3, etc., that is more than sufficient. There is no need for you to mug up a lot of facts and figures from this particular report. If you know these facts and figures, that alone is more than sufficient. So having looked at the important highlights of the World Inequality Report, let us now look into various aspects of the inclusive growth, starting with the definition of inclusive growth. See, as per OECD, inclusive growth is the economic growth that is fairly distributed across the society and creates opportunities for all. And as per UNDP, inclusive growth is defined as the process as well as outcome where all the groups of people have participated in the growth and have benefited equitably from it. So it is always good to remember the definition of inclusive growth while writing an answer in the UPSC mains examination. That is why I have incorporated these two definitions. But let's understand as to what exactly is the inclusive growth based upon the understanding of these two definitions. See, inclusive growth is basically a kind of growth which has basically two dimensions. The first dimension of inclusive growth is that it should provide for equitable distribution of both income as well as wealth. So, as per this particular dimension, inclusive growth is an outcome. It is an outcome in which there is equitable distribution of income as well as wealth. The second dimension of inclusive growth is that it is a kind of growth which is able to create opportunities for all. So when I say that it is able to create opportunities for all, it means that as per this particular dimension, inclusive growth is a process. It means that it is a process which in turn enhances the capacity of the people to contribute to the process of growth. So people's ability to contribute to growth should increase. Only then the inclusive growth can take place. So inclusive growth has first dimension, the outcome, where it provides for equitable distribution of income and wealth, and second dimension, that is when it is able to create opportunities for all, that is when it is able to enhance the capacity of the people to contribute to the process of growth itself. For example, with respect to enhancing the capacity of the people to contribute to the process of growth, inclusive growth would focus upon providing the people with the necessary education, providing the people with the necessary healthcare facilities, providing the necessary skill set to the people, providing the people with the necessary jobs, leveraging the social capital among the people, that is, mobilizing the people into cooperatives, farmer producer organizations, self help groups, and so on. So, only when we are able to educate the people, take care of their healthcare needs, provide them with the necessary skill set, provide them with the jobs, only then people's ability to contribute to the process of growth increases. And only then we would be able to promote growth. And as the growth increases, this growth will in turn provide for equitable distribution of income as well as wealth. So please do remember that inclusive growth is not just about equitable distribution of income and wealth. That is, it is not just about the outcomes. Inclusive growth is equally about the process of the growth itself. Now, for example, in order to provide for equitable distribution of income and wealth, we may go for progressive tax policies. For example, the government may impose higher taxes on the richer people. The tax money so mobilized would then be used for the welfare of the poor people. But this alone is not inclusive growth, because inclusive growth is not just outcome, it is about the process as well. So, if the growth does not provide for educational opportunities, healthcare facilities, skilling of the people, jobs of people, then we will not be able to promote inclusive growth and development in a particular country. So this is the basic idea of inclusive growth. As to how the inclusive growth is different from the welfare approach, see, the welfare approach focuses more upon redistribution of income and wealth. That is, it focuses more upon the outcomes. For example, as part of the welfare approach, we may impose higher taxes on the richer class. The tax money so mobilized would then be used for the welfare of the poor people. But as I said, this is not just the inclusive growth. Inclusive growth is about the process as well. So, the welfare approach focuses only on the outcomes, whereas the inclusive growth focuses both upon the outcomes as well as the process as well. So, inclusive growth will focus upon creation of employment opportunities, enhance human capital formation, it emphasizes on social capital, and so on. So, what are the elements of inclusive growth? How do we promote inclusive growth? The first and most important factor is the GDP growth. It is being said that unless we are able to increase the GDP size, we would always find it difficult to promote inclusive growth. This is so because, see, first and foremost, when the GDP growth take place, we would be able to mobilize more of taxes. As we are able to mobilize more of taxes, government's ability to undertake expenditure for the welfare of the poor people will increase. So this is one aspect. The second aspect is, as the GDP growth rate increases, we would be able to create more of jobs. As we create more of jobs, people will be able to get regular wages. As they get regular wages, their income level will increase, and as the income level increases, we would be able to promote the inclusive growth. So first and foremost, the size of the pie, that is the GDP size, should keep on increasing. As the size of the pie keeps on increasing, more amount of income, more amount of wealth can in turn be distributed among the poor people. So the first element of inclusive growth is the GDP growth itself. The other elements are reduction of poverty, enhance opportunities for the people, redistribution of the income, that is outcome, reducing disparities. See, when we say reducing disparities, it is reducing multifaceted disparities in terms of reducing disparities between different sectors of the economy, reducing disparities between different section of population in a particular country, that is reducing disparity between caste, religion, reducing disparity between rural and urban India, reducing the gender disparities, and so on. Apart from that, even the good governance is an important tool to promote inclusive growth, because even if you focus on all of these aspects, if the administrative efficiency is poor, we will not be able to provide for inclusive growth. Nextly, we must also focus upon the environmental sustainability as well. So as you can see here, there are different factors that contribute to the inclusive growth. So in order to facilitate inclusive growth, we must adopt sector specific, gender specific, population specific, and region specific policies. So these policies should be in turn be able to reduce the disparities between the different sectors, between the different genders, between the different population of a country, and between different regions. So please do remember, whenever you are writing an answer in the mains examination, you must keep these things in the mind. So you must be able to address each and every aspect of inclusive growth. So based upon this particular understanding, let us now look into various challenges before promotion of inclusive growth in India. See, if you look at our GDP size has increased from $275 billion in 1990s to $2.9 trillion. So India is now considered to be among the top 5 largest economies across the world. But in spite of rapid increase in the GDP size, we have failed to promote inclusive growth and development in India. This is evident in the fact that India's ranking on various global indicators such as Human Development Index, Human Capital Index, Global Hunger Index, Environmental Performance Index, Multidimensional Poverty Index, etc., continue to remain poor. Please do let us know in the chat box as to who publishes the Human Development Index and who publishes the Human Capital Index. So coming back to challenges here, let us now look at why India has been facing problems with respect to promotion of inclusive growth. The first aspect is with respect to problems with the poverty eradication programs. See, presently the government is implementing a large number of poverty eradication programs such as MG Narega, public distribution system, etc. But presently there are a number of loopholes, a number of challenges with respect to the implementation of these programs. These loopholes and challenges include the poor identification of beneficiaries, poor allocation of finances, large scale corruption, lack of transparency and accountability, etc. For example, according to Shanta Kumar Committee on FCI reforms, only 46% of the food grains reach the intended beneficiaries under the public distribution system. Similarly, you must have come across the newspaper recently that the amount of money that we have allocated for MG Narega, this is quite lower than the actual demand for the work in the rural areas. The second aspect is with respect to the employment creation. See, one of the biggest paradox of the Indian economy has been that the rapid increase in the GDP size, this has not translated into the higher employment opportunities. The employment elasticity in case of India has remained quite lower at 0.1. This means that for every 1% increase in the GDP growth rate, we have been able to create just 0.1% employment opportunities. So the employment elasticity has remained quite lower at 0.1, which in turn has raised concerns that the Indian economy is presently facing a jobless growth. Apart from the concerns of less quantity of jobs being created, concerns have also been raised over the quality of jobs also. For example, even today, 90% of India's workforce, they are employed as the informal workforce. And these informal workers, they do not have the job security, they do not have income security, they do not have access to social security benefits and so on. And moreover, the amount of wages the informal workers earn, it is quite lower in comparison to the formal workforce. Please comment in the chat box as to what are the reasons for the jobless growth of the Indian economy. The next aspect is with respect to human capital formation. See, the amount of money that we are spending on education, health, etc., it is quite lower than the target. For example, the National Education Policy mandates that the government should spend at least 6% of the GDP on education. But presently, we are spending only around 3%. Similarly, the National Health Policy mandates that the government should spend at least 2.5% of the GDP on healthcare. But presently, we are spending just 1.5% of the GDP on the healthcare, leading to low human capital formation. The next aspect is with respect to gender disparities. For example, there has been a decline in the female labor force participation rate from 45% in 1990s to 25% in the year 2017-18. And this decline is basically attributed to various socio-cultural factors. Now, for example, if you look at the male labor force participation rate in India, it is as high as 75%. On the other hand, the female labor force participation rate has continued to remain lower at 25%. So as you can see here, there is a huge gap between the female labor force participation rate and the male labor force participation rate, leading to lack of empowerment of women. The next problem is with respect to regional disparities, where India is presently staring at both interstate and intrastate disparities. So we have certain states in India which are considered to be more well developed in comparison to other states. So states such as Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, etc., they are considered to be much more developed in comparison to the states in the eastern part of India, the northeastern part of India, and so on. Similarly, even within the developed states, there are certain pockets of underdevelopment. For example, in Gujarat, you have the Saurashtra region. In Maharashtra, you have the Vidarbha region. In Karnataka, you have the Hyderabad Karnataka region. So there are intrastate disparities as well. So these regional disparities are on account of reasons such as top-down planning, lack of decentralization, lack of adequate financing for the development of underdeveloped regions, and so on. The next aspect is we have disparities between different sectors. For example, if you look at the agriculture sector, the growth rate of the agriculture sector is below 4%, but it employs almost around 45% of India's workforce. This in turn has led to a lower income levels of the farmers. For example, according to the Committee on Doubling of Farmers' Income, that is Ashok Dalwai panel, a farmer in case of India earns almost 3 times less income in comparison to a non-farmer. Similarly, if you look at the state of the manufacturing sector in case of India, the share of the manufacturing sector to India's GDP as well as employment has remained stagnant since 1991 reforms. Even today, the manufacturing sector contributes just 17% to India's GDP, and it continues to employ only around 12% of India's workforce. Then we have a problem of lack of sustainable development. See, because of the climate change, India has been facing the adverse weather events such as tropical cyclones, cloud bursts, droughts, floods, etc. And these adverse weather events tend to have a much higher impact on the poor and vulnerable sections such as SC/STs, women, children, etc. And the last and most important aspect is with respect to higher amount of tax evasion and black money within the Indian economy. The next aspect of the article is to whether India should focus upon increasing its GDP size or should it focus upon reducing the income inequality. This was an important theme which was covered in this year's Economic Survey 2021. So in order to understand as to whether India should focus upon increasing the GDP size or should it focus on reducing the income inequality, please go to the economic survey discussion. The link to this particular discussion has been provided in the description box below. So these are some of the important aspects which one should know from the perspective of this particular article. Now coming to these practice questions for the prelims. Coming to the first practice question, the question here is, which among the following deal with the economic inequality in a country? The options are Lorenz curve, Kuznets curve, and Lafayette curve. The Kuznets curve examines the nature of relationship between the GDP growth rate and the income inequality in a particular country. According to this particular curve, as the GDP of a particular country keeps on increasing in the initial stages, it leads to increase in the income inequality. But beyond a particular level, this income inequality keeps on reducing as the GDP size keeps on increasing. So according to Kuznets curve, the nature of relationship between GDP growth rate and income inequality is inverted U-shaped. As far as the Lorenz curve and Gini coefficient is concerned, please go through the DNS dated 5th of June 2021, in which I have discussed in detail both the concept of the Gini coefficient as well as the Lorenz curve. Based upon this particular understanding, please do let us know the answer to these three practice questions. With this, let us now take up the next article. The next article appears on page number 7. The article is titled as Low Tobacco Tax, Poor Health. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 2 Governance, particularly under the subsection of issues related to health. This article shall also be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Indian Economy under the subsection of taxation. Now, this particular article carries out a critical analysis of the government taxation policy on the tobacco products. So, this article basically discusses the present taxation policy on tobacco products, what are the problems in the present taxation policies, and what should be done going ahead. So, let us understand various facets related to this particular article. See, India is considered to be the second largest consumer of tobacco products such as pan masala, BDs, cigarettes, etc. According to some of the estimates, almost around 28% of adults above the age of 15 years consume various tobacco products in India. The higher consumption of tobacco products has got both health implications as well as economic implications. As far as the health related implications is concerned, higher consumption of tobacco is in turn associated with various non-communicable diseases such as cancer, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, chronic lung diseases, etc. So since there is a higher burden of non-communicable diseases, the government would be in turn required to undertake higher amount of expenditure. It is being estimated that in the year 2018-19, the government had to spend approximately around rupees 1.7 lakh crore to deal with the problems which have been caused due to the higher consumption of tobacco. And this money was estimated to be as high as around 1% of India's GDP in the year 2018-19. So these facts and figures were recently highlighted in the article published in the Live Mint. So in order to reduce the consumption of tobacco, the National Health Policy 2017 has come up with clear-cut targets as well as strategy. As far as the target is concerned, the National Health Policy 2017 seeks to reduce the prevalence of tobacco usage by 15% by the end of 2020 and further by additional 15% by 2030. So the idea here is by 2030, the prevalence of tobacco usage should reduce by 30%. And in order to reduce the tobacco consumption, the National Health Policy 2017 seeks to use tax as a tool. So the National Health Policy 2017 believes that if you are able to increase the taxation on various tobacco related products, tobacco products will become costly. And this will in turn discourage the people from consuming more of tobacco. The higher taxation on tobacco products may in turn force the people to either quit tobacco or reduce the consumption of tobacco. So if you look at the present taxation policy of the government on tobacco, right now the government considers tobacco as a sin good. That is a good which is harmful for the people. So since it is considered as a sin good or a harmful good, the government imposes multiple taxes on various tobacco products. So on various tobacco products such as pan masala, BDs, cigarettes, etc., the government imposes multiple taxes such as excise duty, GST, GST compensation cess, and the National Calamity Contingency Duty. So when a person buys the cigarettes, this particular person would be required to pay multiple taxes which include the excise duty, GST, GST compensation cess, and the national calamity contingency duty. As far as the GST rate is concerned, since tobacco is considered to be a sin good, it has been placed under the highest tax slab of 28%. On top of it, we are also imposing the GST compensation cess. Further, the national calamity contingency duty is also imposed. See, the national calamity contingency duty is presently imposed on various tobacco products as well as the crude petroleum. So, whatever money the government gets through the national calamity contingency duty, all of this particular money is in turn put into the National Disaster Response Fund. So, please to understand here, with respect to National Disaster Response Fund, a certain amount of money into the NDRF comes directly from the National Calamity Contingency Duty, and certain additional amount of money also comes from the government's budgetary support. That is, from the budget itself, the government may allocate certain amount of money into the National Disaster Response Fund. So, since we are imposing multiple taxes on the tobacco products, right now the burden of taxation is quite higher. For example, if you look at cigarettes, on the cigarettes the burden of taxation is as high as 52%, on BDs it is 22%, and on pan masala it is 64%. So if a particular person is buying a pack of cigarettes whose market price is equal to 100 rupees, this means that out of this 100 rupees a person is paying 52 rupees in the form of various taxes. So right now, as you can see, the government is imposing a number of taxes on various tobacco products in order to make the prices of the tobacco products higher and to discourage the people from consumption of tobacco. In spite of this, the tobacco consumption in case of India has not reduced. So what exactly are the problems? See, first and foremost, the World Health Organization recommends that the tax burden on various tobacco products should be minimum 75%, which means if a person is buying a tobacco product, minimum 75% should be in the form of taxes. But as you can see, in case of India, we do not have a minimum taxation of 75% on any of the tobacco products. On cigarettes, the taxation is 52%, on BDs it is 22%, and on pan masala it is 64%. Which means that even though the tax rates are higher in case of India, it is not as high as recommended by the World Health Organization. The second aspect is the fact that since 2017, the tax rate on various tobacco related products have increased only by 5%. So because of these two reasons, we have not been able to discourage the people from the consumption of tobacco. And this in turn has led to a number of implications. Take for example, it has led to a windfall profits for the tobacco companies. So higher profits would in turn translate into higher production of tobacco related products, which once again has an adverse impact on the health of the people. Second aspect is the government is losing out on the revenue which it would have otherwise earned by increasing the taxes on various tobacco products. Thirdly, we have already seen the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In particular, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a far higher impact on the people who smoke tobacco. And nextly, see, the government's finances have got adversely affected because of COVID-19 pandemic. On one hand, the overall tax collected by the government has got reduced, while on the other hand, the expenditure obligations of the government has increased. So in order to address the poor financial position of the government, one way out here is to increase the tax rates on the tobacco products. By increasing the tax rates on the tobacco products, first and foremost, we would be able to gain more amount of revenue. That is first benefit. And second benefit here is we would be able to discourage the people from consumption of tobacco and hence improve the health outcomes in case of India. So accordingly, recently in October 2021, the government of India has appointed a committee named as the Vikashsheel Committee. The mandate of this particular committee is to evolve a comprehensive tax policy on the tobacco products. So this particular committee is required to analyze the present taxation policy on tobacco, identify the gaps and loopholes, and what should be done in order to reduce or discourage the consumption of tobacco in India. It is expected that as and when this particular committee submits its recommendations would be incorporated into the next year's union budget. So these are some of the important aspects which you should know from the perspective of this particular article. With this, let us now take up the next article. The next article appears on page number 6. The article is titled as High LPG Prices Are Scorching the Air Pollution Fight. This article shall be important both from the perspective of prelims as well as mains. As far as mains examination is concerned, it shall be important under the GS Paper 2 Governance, specifically under the subsection of Design of Government Schemes, Policies and Initiatives. See, presently the Government of India is giving the subsidy on the LPG cylinders. First and foremost, this subsidy is being provided under the Ujjwala scheme, and it is also provided under another scheme known as the Pahel scheme. As far as the Ujjwala scheme is concerned, under this particular scheme, the government provides for the subsidy on the LPG cylinders for the new connection. So if there is a particular household which is using a chulha, and if such a household wants to switch to LPG connection, in such cases the government provides for subsidy through Ujjwala scheme. But if a particular household wants to refill the cylinders, for refilling of cylinders, the government provides for the direct benefits transfer to the Pahel scheme. See, in the last 1 to 1.5 years, the government has drastically reduced the subsidy for the refilling of cylinders under the Pahel scheme. So, since the government has reduced the subsidy on the refilling of cylinders, most of the poor households whose finances have got adversely affected because of COVID-19 pandemic, these poor households have switched back to chulhas. So the poor households earlier they may be using the LPG connection, but since the government has now reduced the subsidy on the refilling of cylinders, the households have switched back to chulhas. In this particular regard, this particular article here discusses as to how we can increase the penetration of the usage of LPG cylinders in India. So let us first understand the important details about the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. See, if a particular household wants to switch from chulha to a LPG connection, a household would have to spend significant amount of money. It has to provide for the security deposit, it has to buy a LPG cylinder, gas regulator, cooking stove and so on. So the higher cost involved in getting a new LPG connection can be a prohibitive factor for the household to switch from chulhas to the LPG connection. Hence, in order to incentivize the households to get a new LPG connection, the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana provides for a number of benefits. First and foremost, the household would no longer be required to provide for the security deposit. Secondly, the government provides for a financial assistance of rupees 1,600 for buying of a new LPG cylinder as well as gas regulator. And thirdly, the households are also provided with the free cooking stove as well as the first refilling of the LPG cylinder. So please do understand here that the first refilling of LPG cylinder is provided under the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. The subsequent refilling of LPG cylinders would be done through the direct benefits transfer provided through the Pahel scheme. As far as the beneficiaries is concerned, earlier the beneficiaries of the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana included only the women members of the BPL families who were identified through the socio-economic caste census. But the scope of the beneficiaries has now been expanded to include various poor families that do not have the LPG connection. So these poor families could be the poor SC/ST households, tribal families, families living in remote areas and so on. So all of these poor families, they will be identified to the socio-economic caste census. And please do make a note here that the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana is implemented by the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, which becomes extremely important as far as your prelims examination is concerned. Now coming to various benefits of providing subsidies through the Ujjwala Yojana as well as the Pahel scheme. The first benefit here is it will help us address the energy poverty in India. See, there is a direct correlation between access to energy and human development. If people have access to clean, safe energy, this will in turn help us promote the human development. But unfortunately, in case of India, we are facing the energy poverty. This can be seen from the fact that even though India accounts for 18% of the world's population, it uses only 6% of the world's energy. So, in India, we keep on talking about the income poverty, but the energy poverty is more widespread it is more pervasive than the income poverty. So by providing subsidies to the Ujjwala scheme and the Pahel scheme, we will be able to reduce the energy poverty. Secondly, because of the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala scheme, we have been able to increase the LPG coverage from 62% in the year 2016 to 99.5% in the year 2021. Thirdly, earlier women had to spend substantial amount of time on collecting the firewood for chulhas. But because of the increase in the LPG coverage, women have more amount of time now, which otherwise can be used for more productive activities. Nextly, it has helped us improve the health outcomes as the indoor air pollution has got reduced. Nextly, it has helped us strengthen Article 21, that is right to life, as enshrined in the Indian Constitution. And lastly, it has helped us progress towards Sustainable Development Goal 7, which calls upon the countries to provide for affordable, sustainable, and reliable energy for all. In spite of these benefits, there are a number of challenges as highlighted in this particular article. The first challenge here is with respect to the fact that the government has started reducing the subsidy as provided under the Pahel scheme for the refilling of the LPG cylinders. So because of this reduction in the subsidy, the households are not going for refilling of LPG cylinders and they are switching back to chulhas. So in order to address this particular constraint, the article has given a number of strategies. First and foremost, presently under the Pahel scheme, the government provides for subsidy on the refilling of maximum 12 LPG cylinders in a single year. Now this article highlights that probably we can reduce the number of subsidized LPG cylinders under the Pahel scheme from 12 to around 7 to 8. This will help the government to rationalize on the LPG subsidies. Secondly, the government should continue to provide the subsidy at least for the households who were able to get the LPG connection under the Ujjwala scheme. And nextly, we must go for exclusion of households above certain income criteria. So certain households whose income is above a certain level, those households can be excluded from getting the subsidy under the Pahel scheme. So by adopting these strategies, the government can go for rationalization of subsidies and ensure that the poor families are able to get the subsidy on the refilling of the LPG cylinders on a continuous basis. The second challenge is with respect to the fact that people continue to use biomass instead of LPG cylinders. This is on account of number of reasons. First reason here is some of the people have a flawed perception that the food which is cooked on chulhas, it is more tastier, it is more healthier in comparison to the food which is cooked on the LPG cylinder. So this is a flawed perception among the people. Apart from that, since the biomass is available in abundance, since it is quite cheaper, people do not switch to the LPG cylinders. So in order to address these two problems, first and foremost, we would have to increase the awareness among the people. In particular, people need to be educated about the adverse impact of chulhas, as to how it would lead to increase in indoor air pollution, as to how it can cause an adverse health impact on the women, and so on. At the same time, people should also be enlightened about the benefits of using the LPG cylinders on a continuous basis. Nextly, see, as the biomass is readily available and since it is much cheaper in comparison to LPG connection, people continue to use the biomass. So to avoid this particular problem, the article has suggested that we need to create a market for biomass. So we can enable the households to sell the biomass such as cow dung cakes, crop stubble, etc. to various biogas plants, industries, etc. So by creating a market for biomass, it would be a win-win situation because on one hand, we would be able to use the biomass on a sustainable basis and at the same time, we would be able to enhance the rural income. So these are some of the important aspects which one should know with respect to this particular article. With this, let us now take up the next article. The next article appears on page number 12, that is the business page of the Hindu newspaper. The article is titled as RBI to extend UPI to feature phone users. This article shall be important from the perspective of UPSC prelims, particularly under the subsection of Indian economy. As you can see, in the previous year prelims, repeatedly questions have been asked with respect to various aspects of payment system. For example, in prelims 2017, a direct question was asked with respect to UPI. In prelims 2017, once again, a question related to RuPay has been asked. In prelims 2018, a question has been asked as to which of these agencies link all the ATMs in India. And in prelims 2018, another question has been asked with respect to Beam app. Hence, from the perspective of this particular article, one should be aware about the payment systems in India, particularly about the Unified Payment Interface and the National USSD platform. So let's understand these aspects. See, when you look at the payment systems are basically the systems that facilitate the transfer of money from one bank account to another. These payment systems can be broadly categorized into three types, that is the cash itself, paper-based payment systems such as checks, demand drafts, etc., and the electronic-based payment systems, which include the remittance-based systems, card-based systems, mobile-based systems, and the systems which are used for bulk clearance. For example, most of you would have used the remittance-based payment systems to transfer money from one bank account to another. So these remittance-based payment systems include RTGS, NEFT, IMPS. Then we have the card-based payment systems which include debit card, credit card, etc. Then the mobile-based payment systems which include the Unified Payment Interface, National Unified USSD platform. Then the app-based payment systems such as Paytm, Google Pay, Bheem app, etc. And then we have the payment systems which are used for bulk clearing. These include the National Automated Clearing House and the Electronic Clearing System. See, the bulk clearing payment systems are basically used for the high volume repetitive transactions. Now, for example, let's say if you have to pay the monthly EMIs, if you have to pay the monthly utility bills such as water bill, electricity bill, etc. So for such repetitive transactions, you can actually authorize your bank to auto debit your bank account at every month. So based upon this particular mandate given by you, the bank can auto debit your account for payment of your EMI, payment of your utility bills, and so on. So all of these transactions basically take place through the National Automated Clearing House. Now coming to the main focus of this particular article, that is UPI. UPI here stands for Unified Payment Interface. So it is basically a payment interface which has been developed by the National Payment Corporation of India. Using this payment interface, we can provide for instant transfer of money. So this UPI can be used on the smartphones and it requires the internet connection. So one of the biggest benefit of UPI is that it is an open source interface. So being an open source interface, the UPI can be integrated by the private entities into their own apps. Now, for example, apps such as Paytm, Google Pay, PhonePe, etc. have integrated UPI into their apps, which in turn facilitate the various banking related transactions. Secondly, you can link multiple bank accounts into a single application. Now, for example, for your Google Pay, the Google Pay can be linked to your multiple bank accounts, and while doing a transaction, you can actually choose as to from which particular bank account you would want to do a particular transaction. And UPI is also considered to be very safe as well as secure. But one of the biggest problem with respect to UPI is that it requires a smartphone as well as internet connection. So UPI as such does not function on the feature phones. Feature phones are basically those phones that support only the voice calling or say messaging. It is not a smartphone. So Unified Payment Interface as such does not function on feature phones which do not have the internet connection. So in order to solve this particular problem, the National Payment Corporation of India has launched a separate platform known as the National Unified USSD platform. Using this particular platform, we can do various banking related transactions on the feature phones without the need to have the internet connection. So if you have a feature phone, if you're not using a smartphone and if you want to do various banking related transactions, then one can simply dial *99# from their mobile phone in order to do various banking related transactions. So through this particular platform, we can get to know our account balances. We can also use this particular platform to transfer money from our bank account to another and so on. So this particular platform was initially launched in the year 2012. In spite of this platform has not been very successful. So on one hand, you have the UPI, which has been extremely successful, wherein people are using the UPI for making various kinds of transactions, but the same cannot be said as far as the national USSD platform is concerned. Hence, in order to ensure that even those people who are using the feature phones, even those people who do not have access to internet connection, should be able to do various banking related transactions, the RBI has recently announced that the UPI as such will be extended even to the feature phones as well. So right now there are a number of innovations which are going on. So in future it is expected that the UPI will also be able to function on the feature phones which do not have internet connection, and this will in turn enable us to improve the financial inclusion within the Indian economy. So these are some of the important aspects which one should know with respect to this particular article. Now coming to two important articles which have already been covered in our previous DNS videos. One article is related to Ken Betwa River Link project, and the other article is with respect to India-Russia relations. The article on Ken Betwa River Link project was covered in our DNS dated 20th of April 2021, and the article on India-Russia relationship was covered in our DNS dated 21st of June 2021. So in case if you have not gone through these two articles, please go through the respective DNS in order to understand about these topics. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Let us have a look at the question for the day. The answer to the question that was asked in yesterday's DNS is option D.